Hi, it's Lori from Coast to Coast Craft Girls, coming to you from the West Coast. Today I wanted to share my final project, I guess you want to call it, my exam project from, as some of you know, I've mentioned before, I'm doing the AlteNew Education or AECP, so AlteNew Education Certification Program. And my level 1 challenge was to create a boxed set of cards, between 4 and 6 cards. This is the for her, so I need a set for her and a set for him. And this is my for her set, and it needed to be 4 to 6 cards with packaging that all kind of went together with some sort of a theme. And along with that, I needed to use components from the classes that I took as part of the level 1 training, and use a recycled element. So something in my cards, in all of my cards, needed to have a recycled element in somewhere in the boxed set of cards. So I decided on for a theme. One is the color. Everything's got this sort of lavender purple color going through it, which starts with the packaging and goes through all of the cards. And you'll see my other theme, which goes with my recycled element, is a book. So I'm using pages of a book from an old book on each of my cards. I'm using elements from the book, so pages out of the book, to create each of the 6 cards that I've made. And so because my theme is a book, I made a book to put them in. So this is my storage box. It's a book that's 6 by 8 by 2. So 6 by 8 by 2 inches deep. And it ties shut with a ribbon. So let me open it up and I'll get started. So it's my pretty book box, and I'll start with card number 1. So in this card, I used my book page in the back as sort of a background element. I used the die cutting techniques and stencil techniques from the die cutting and stencil class that's part of the AECP Level 1 training. And this is a die, and I used a die cut to create a stencil, and then inked through that die cut the negative space to create my stenciled background. And then they're all birthday cards, is my other, I guess, theme, if you want to call it that. They're all 5 by 7 cards. So this is the first using die cutting technique and a stencil technique. My second card, I used my book pages to actually die cut the flowers and the foliage. And then I used, this is that negative die cutting technique. So you die cut out of the background, and then rather than using the die cut element itself, so I'll show you, these are the die cut elements that I cut out of this. So there it's that one. I take that out and then just let the background show through to create a look of background foliage. And then my flowers, I actually die cut out of the pages of a book and then inked them. And this is just an old book that I had. My second card, or third card, sorry, I used an ink blending technique on the background on the pages of the book. So I stamped onto the page of a book and then used ink blending around the edges to create a vignette to draw your eye into the center element of the flowers. And then I also used ink blending on the petals of the flowers to create depth within the flower petals. So you can see they're darker in the center, lighter to the outside. That creates a sense of depth on the petals. My fourth card, I used a layered stamping technique. The class was all about layering, and to create layered flowers and foliage. And then I used the book page to create my border. And then I did the same layered stamping of the foliage on the book page to create that sort of foliage border to go with my layered stamping flowers. On this one, I also used a layered stamping technique for the floral, and then I used the book page and I just tore it to create that background element that really helps draw focus into the center element. I used a ombre ink blending technique on the background, and then one of the classes that we took was part of the AECP was called Let It Shine, and it was about using small elements of metallics or some sort of shiny to draw focus and to give your cards a little bit of bling. So I used just that little bit of gold on each side. I used a gold heat embossed sentiment with a little bit of a gold matte. And then this is a gold foil. This is the same, it's the outline stamp from this floral, but I just used that with some sticky embossing powder and some foil to create a really pretty ombre ink with slight foiling background. And my last card, again, I used that torn book page as the background and as a little bit of a matte layer for my sentiment. And again, I used an ink blending technique with an ombre ink of light purple to a darker purple. And then they had, we learned how to use sort of this, create this bokeh effect with ink blending. And that's what these down here at the bottom are, with just a little bit of a hint of yellow coming in for the flowers, but also to just kind of create that little bokeh effect on the bottom. And those are my 6 cards. They all fit, they're 5x7 cards. They all fit in my little book gift box that ties shut into a nice, beautiful little package. It was a great, fun challenge, and I'm looking forward to level 2. So I'm going to put my cards together and I'll talk you through how I made them all. So the first card is using, and you'll see through the theme, I'm using book pages. So I've got an old book and I'm using the old pages from a book that I have sort of in the name of recycling. And I'm using book page elements on all of my pages. So this one, I'm using the easy ink blending technique of kind of ink blending from a light purple down to a darker purple, and then using a yellow to create a bit of a bokeh effect. I did this in one of my other videos on easy ink blending, but essentially you just go ahead and ink blend from the lightest purple down to the darkest purple. And then I took a little finger dauber, grab it. So you take a little finger dauber, put it in your yellow ink, and then just softly kind of push and rotate a little bit. And that gives you those nice sort of color variations in there, which I really like. Then I stamped the Dreamy Dahlias stamp, and this set comes with a die and stencils and all of that, but I just stamped it in black, and then I kind of went over and added a little bit darker purple around the flowers and put a little bit of the yellow in the centers, and I'm just going to leave it like that. Got some green matte paper. On my book page, I just ripped it to about the size that I wanted. Now to tear and get, I wanted a torn edge, but I wanted it fairly square. I didn't want it too rough. Now you can see I actually put 2 pages together because my book page wasn't big enough to get a full 5x7 mat, but it's fine, it works. The way that I tore it is I just took my page and put my ruler down and just kind of used my ruler to create my line, just like that. And that helps you get you don't want to actually rip it. So see, if you rip it all up against the ruler like that, you get too much of a straight edge. I didn't want that. Then I might as well just cut it with my paper trimmer. I wanted something varied, so I kind of tore a little bit at a time and didn't pull back against the ruler, just kind of pull up. And that gives you essentially the right size, but you get that nice variation in the page. So that's how I did that. And then I ripped a second piece just to mount my sentiment onto, just to bring that book page back in. So I'm going to glue this all up, and then we'll go on to the second one. Okay, there's my first card finished. I thought about raising up this stamped layer and decided not to, but I did put some foam tape underneath my birthday wishes just to give it a little bit of a lift. And it's not straight. There we go. Okay, on to my second card. Now for this card, I used some techniques from the Easy Die Cutting class, as well as the Celebration Stencil techniques. And I used the Itty Bitty Branches, this die, and I just cut and made my own stencil. And I took my piece of background paper and I just put the stencil in all different spots, and I inked through it with a dark olive ink. With Sugar Kelp is the name of the ink. And I just kind of inked, some of it's lighter, some of it's darker, and I just kind of went all over. And makes a great stencil. This is just a piece of white cardstock. And I'm going to use that as the background of my card. And this this is a great way of making your own background paper. And I'm going to put a thing in the middle, which is why I kind of left that center open. I took that same cardstock and I used 2 oval nesting dies to create about a 1/2 inch wide oval frame. And then I used the same nesting dies to cut that out of some foam, a sheet of foam, and glued that on there just to give me some lift. And this is just about a 5 1/4 inch frame. And then I cut a piece of my book page and inked it with some brownish ink, and I'm just going to mount that on the back and then put that on my page. And then I used the Prairie Rose layering die set, and I cut some of my flowers. I cut those in white cardstock and then inked them with my purple inks. And I cut my green leaves, and then I stamped a nice happy birthday sentiment. And I'm just going to build my bouquet right on top of here. But I am going to shape these petals just a little bit. Give it a little bit of 3D-ness. And then I'm going to put my sentiment right down here at the bottom. I'm going to put a little bit of foam tape underneath that corner. Actually, I'm just going to use my 3D glue gel. And there's my second card. Using the Prairie Rose layering die and then creating a stencil with my Itty Bitty Branches, and using with my die cutting to create a stencil, and then stenciling through to create my background. It's card number 2. And my second card, or my third card, is a super easy one. It's basically just layering. I cut, some layers in green and a pattern paper, another layer in green, and then I took my book page. I stamped with Dreamy Dahlias on there and went ahead and inked them with the stencils that come with it. But I just stamped and inked right over the top of that text. And then I did some inking around the edges just to bring your eye in. And in fact, looks like I need to do a little bit more on this side. So I used the ink blending technique around the edges as well as within the petals. But if you ink around these edges, just like this, it creates this nice vignette effect, which draws your eye into the center of whatever your element is. And in this case, my stamped and inked image. And then I just stamped my sentiment on some white card and backed it with green. I am going to put this on foam. And I told you I like to use these foam sheets to raise up my panels because I think it gives it more support so you don't get any, when you use foam tape, it can sink down. Okay, and there's card number 3. Using a nice ink blending technique both in the flowers and on the background to pull your eye into those beautiful flowers. Okay, in card number 4, I used that same kind of background, and then I cut just some strips of gold that I'm going to put around my inked panel. Now, this inked panel I used, I stamped the Gardenia Duo, this particular stamp right here, or this outline stamp. I stamped in sticky ink in an embossing, the Versamark ink. And then I used the Tim Holtz sticky embossing powder. And when you heat it up, then you put, while it's warm, you put some Decafoil over it and peel that off, and you get this nice foiling technique without having to use a foil machine or a laminator. And then once it was foiled, the foil resists the ink. So now I can ink blend it from light to dark in the purple. So I used that. And then I've got some gold that I did a heat embossed sentiment and then matted that in the shiny gold. And I got some shiny gold that I'm going to put on each side of my panel. And this is really about an easy ink blending technique over that foiling, but also using some nice shiny metallics, as shown in the Let It Shine class, to just, not a lot, but enough to just give you a little bit of bling. So let me put that all together. And then I use that same stamp, except it's a layering stamp. So All About Layering, the All About Layering class is all about using layering stamps. This is one of them that I used, the Gardenia Duo layering stamp set. It's 3 layers, the outline, a solid layer, and then the kind of detail layer. And then I stamped the leaves as well. And they do not have layering stamps. I just stamped the outline and then just used my ink blending tool to ink blend in them. I do not have the die that goes with this, so I fussy cut them out. And I'm going to put my flower and leaves on right here. And when you're putting on leaves, you want to kind of use a bit of a triangle technique. So you want, So I've got one here, and I'm going to put this one this way. Right, kind of right at the top of that sentiment. But that just sort of frames it and is pleasing to the eye. And there's my 4th card. Now my 5th card, I again used a layering stamp set. In this case, I used the layering stamp set Beautiful Day, just like in All About Layering. And I created my layered flowers and foliage. These two, I layered the lightest, the second lightest, and then the third purples. So I used Wisteria, Hydrangea, and Ultraviolet. On this one, I used Hydrangea, Ultraviolet, and Andromeda. So I used 3 different, a little bit darker, just for some contrast. Then, because I wanted to bring in my book page element, I created a border from my book page, and I just cut a strip of it that's 1.5 inches wide, and I inked it with a little bit of brown ink just to take that starkness of the white off. And then I used my foliage layering stamps, and I stamped my foliage onto that border just to make it fit in with the rest of the card. I'm going to put that on there, and then I'm going to put it on my card base, and then I'm going to put my flowers on. I'm going to put my flowers on, and again, I'm going to use some 3D glue gel. Just like that. And the thing I love about the 3D glue gel is you can adjust and move things around after you've kind of placed them, which I love. And there's card number 5. So for my final card, I used a negative die cut technique with the itty bitty branches to cut out of this ivory pearl card just all of these different foliage elements, and I'm going to glue that onto my green cardstock just like that, and I'm going to leave those showing, and that just gives you a sense of green foliage in the background. So then I cut the Sulfur Cosmos, I cut 3 flowers and a bunch of foliage out of my book pages and inked those up, and to create my floral elements and my foliage. And I'm just going to put those right on my card with my sentiment. So let me get this all glued up. Now with the die cut, the negative die cut, you got to get glue into all these little pieces so they don't peel up and rip. That's the hardest part. And then I've got my sentiment and my Cosmos flowers, which I'm just going to arrange on here and then tuck my foliage all in. Okay. And my last card, using a negative die cutting technique and then some die cut flowers. So let me bring them all back in here. And there we go, my 6 cards. I had a lot of fun with this challenge, and of using kind of creating a theme all the way through. So obviously I've got my book pages and purples, but using the techniques from the classes that are part of the Level 1 AECP training, and had a lot of fun with it. So I'm going to start with the box portion of my book card, and you need a piece of card that is 11.5 by 9.5, and I scored at 2 inches all the way around. So 2 inches, 2 inches, 2 inches, 2 inches. And then once you've scored at 2 inches, you're going to trim up here and then slice out little corners on each of these little tabs to create these tabs. Okay. And then I'm going to put some adhesive on the tabs to make my box. This creates a box that's the bottom of the box that's 5.5 by 7.5 by 2 inches deep, which is exactly what I need. Okay, I'm going to set that to one side to dry. And then I've got my piece that wraps around. And for that, I created a cover that's 8 by 8. Okay, and I scored at 2. And this will give me a cover that's 2 inches this way and then 6 by 8, because my interior box is 5.5 by 7.5, so I wanted an extra 1/2 inch around. And I've got 2 of those. And I'm going to glue those together just like that. And then my box will sit on the inside. So let me go ahead and glue these together. Now, before I do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and mat and layer these. So I've cut some mats and layers that I'm going to put on the front, this side, and this side, because my box, this box, is going to sit in there, so I don't need to mat that, and I'm not going to mat the very back, which you can if you want, but I'm not going to. I need to put a piece of ribbon in because I want some ribbon in here to tie it shut. So I've just got 2 pieces of white ribbon, and they're about 16 inches long, but I'm going to trim them up anyway. But I'm going to put it right in the middle. Glue that down. Just get it there straight. And you want to glue this on the inside cover. And if you put it between the base cardstock and the mat and layer, it'll hold it in there and look nice. Okay. Now I'm going to glue my box in here, and I'm going to put my other piece of ribbon on the other side. Okay, and then your box is just going to close, and you're going to be able to tie it shut. But I'm going to be careful. I'm just going to leave that for a second while it's drying. Now I've got a little bit of decoration. I cut and put together 2 of the Hill Blossoms die set and 1 of the Lilac layering die set, both from AlteNew. And I'm just going to put those on the front of my card just for a little bit of decoration. It just gives the box a little bit of decoration on the front. I want to be careful that I don't mess that up. And then I'll be able to put my cards and envelopes right inside. So I've got my 6 cards and my 6 5x7 envelopes. They go right in there. Close up and tie it shut. And there we go. Nice gift box. Nice little book gift box. And we untie it and open it up. And we've got our beautiful cards and envelopes inside. Thanks for watching.